Fleet Commander Zarkarath stood in the war chamber of the Endless Judgment. His forearms folded behind his back as he watched the star maps glow before him. The chamber was dark except for the blue light that came from the holographic display. Around the table, his best officers waited in silence. They were the finest military minds of the Keltheran Empire, warriors who had conquered 17 star systems. Zarkarath's scales gleamed under the soft light as he reached forward with one clawed hand. The display changed, showing a thick cloud of purple and red gases. The Typhon Nebula. Inside that cosmic storm they would spring their trap. 6 months, Zarkarath said, his voice deep and rough. For 6 months we have watched the humans. We have studied their routes. We have learned their patterns. They are predictable creatures. One of his officers, a younger warrior named Kelth, leaned forward. The supply convoy follows the same path every cycle. They think they are safe because they move in numbers. Zarkarath made a sound that passed for laughter among his people. Safe, the humans believe in safety. They are children playing at war. They have no idea what true battle means. The display zoomed in on a specific route through the nebula. A thin line of light showed where human ships would travel. It was called Supply Convoy Route Delta 7, and the humans used it to move food, weapons, and equipment to their outer colonies. The nebula is perfect, another officer said. Her name was Veshitar, and she commanded the stealth divisions. The radiation is thick. Their sensors will be blind. They will not see us until our weapons are already firing. Zarkarath nodded slowly. He had planned this ambush himself, spending long nights studying every detail. The Typhon Nebula was a maze of gas clouds and magnetic storms. Human technology was not good enough to see through it. The Keltherans had better sensors, but even they would be limited. That was fine. They did not need to see far. They only needed to hide and wait. How many ships do we have? Zarkarath asked, though he already knew the answer. 300 warships, Veshitar replied with pride in her voice. Cruisers, destroyers, and battleships. We have enough firepower to destroy anything the humans send. And how many ships will the humans have? Their convoy? Maybe 50. Most of them are cargo vessels. Fat, slow, and weak. They might have 10 warships as guards. Nothing more. The war chamber filled with the sounds of Keltheran approval. It was a clicking noise they made deep in their throats. Victory was certain. The humans would not stand a chance. Zarkarath touched the display again. The view changed to show a human ship. It was blocky and simple. Nothing like the elegant curves of Keltheran vessels. The humans built their ships like boxes with engines attached. There was no art to them, no beauty. These are the humans, Zarkarath said. They are new to the galaxy. They have only been traveling the stars for 100 of their years. We have been a spacefaring people for 3,000 years. They are infants. They do not understand war as we do. When do we strike? Kelth asked eagerly. 3 weeks from now, the convoy will enter the nebula. We will position our fleet throughout the cloud, hidden in the interference. When they reach the center, when they are far from any help, we will attack from all sides. They will have nowhere to run. The officers clicked their approval again. It was a good plan. No, it was a perfect plan. What if they detect us somehow? One officer asked quietly. It was a reasonable question, though it felt almost foolish to ask. Zarkarath turned to face him. How? Their sensors cannot pierce the nebula. Their technology is weak. We have been watching them for months, and they have shown no sign that they know we exist. They are blind, deaf, and stupid. This will not be a battle. It will be a slaughter. Far away, in another part of space, Captain Sarah Chen sat in the command chair of the UESF Indomitable. The bridge was quiet. Her crew worked at their stations, checking systems and running diagnostics. Everything appeared normal. Status report, Chen said calmly. Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Park, looked up from his console. All systems green, Captain. The convoy is forming up. We should be ready to depart within the hour. Good. Maintain standard protocols. I want this to look like any other supply run. Yes, ma'am. Chen looked at the main screen. It showed 49 other ships, all of them waiting to begin their journey. They were cargo vessels, or at least they looked like cargo vessels. Big, slow, and unremarkable. Exactly what you would expect to see in a supply convoy, but appearances could be deceiving. Chen allowed herself a small smile, though no one on the bridge would understand why. She had her orders. She knew what was coming, and she knew what the Keltherans did not. They were being watched. On the tactical display, the route to the Typhon Nebula glowed softly. In 3 weeks, they would enter that storm of gas and radiation. The Keltherans thought they were setting a trap. They thought they were the hunters. Chen looked at the countdown timer. 3 weeks, 21 days until the Keltherans learned a hard lesson about underestimating humanity. Helm, she said quietly. Prepare for departure. Let's go deliver some supplies. Aye, Captain. The engines of the Indomitable hummed to life. Around her, the convoy began to move. 50 ships heading toward the Typhon Nebula, heading toward what the Keltherans believed would be their greatest victory. Chen thought about the Keltheran fleet commander, sitting in his war room, feeling proud of his clever plan. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. 3 weeks, she whispered to herself. Enjoy them while you can. 3 weeks earlier, in a facility buried deep beneath the surface of Luna, Commander Marcus Webb sat in darkness. The only light came from the dozens of screens that covered the curved walls of the intelligence center. Each screen showed data streams, star maps, and intercepted communications. This was the nerve center of Earth's intelligence division, and Marcus Webb was its best analyst. Show me the timeline again, Webb said to his assistant, Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura. The main screen changed. A timeline appeared stretching back 6 months. Red dots marked Keltheran activities. Blue dots marked human responses. But there was something else too. Tiny green dots that appeared before every red dot. We detected their surveillance 6 months and 2 days ago, Nakamura explained. A Keltheran scout ship took position near the Barnard Gate. They thought they were far enough away to remain hidden. But they weren't, Webb finished. No, sir. Our deep space sensors picked up their engine signature. It was faint, but it was there. We've been tracking them ever since. Webb leaned back in his chair. 6 months ago, he had made a decision. When they discovered the Keltheran scouts watching human convoy routes, he could have ordered an immediate response. They could have chased the scouts away or destroyed them. Instead, Webb did something different. He decided to watch the Watchers. Tell me about the ghost drones, Webb said. Nakamura smiled. The ghost drones were her project, something she had been developing for 2 years. They were tiny machines no bigger than a grain of sand. Each one was equipped with basic sensors, communication relays, and a small computer core. But what made them special was how they spread. We've deployed 3,000 ghost drones, Nakamura said. They attach themselves to Keltheran communications. Every time a Keltheran ship sends a message, our drones piggyback on the signal. They spread from ship to ship, station to station. The Keltherans have no idea they're there. And they're giving us access to everything? Yes, sir. We can read their orders before their captains receive them. We can listen to their strategic meetings. We can even access their sensor data. If they see something, we see it too. Webb stood and walked closer to the main screen. The timeline showed everything. The Keltherans had been planning their ambush for months. They had studied human convoy patterns. They had chosen the Typhon Nebula as their ambush point. They had assembled 300 warships, and every step of the way, humanity had been reading their mail. They think we're stupid, Webb said quietly. They think we can't see them watching us. Should we tell Captain Chen about the drones, sir? Webb shook his head. Chen knows what she needs to know. She knows the Keltherans are planning an ambush. She knows where and when it will happen. The technical details can stay with us. On another screen, a schematic of the convoy appeared. 50 ships, all marked as cargo vessels in official records. But Webb knew the truth. 20 of those cargo ships were actually retrofitted cruisers. Their hulls had been modified to look like civilian vessels, but inside they carried military-grade weapons, armor, and shields. The Keltherans would get a nasty surprise when those cargo boxes started shooting back. What about the stealth ships? Webb asked. Already in position, Nakamura replied. She pulled up another display. This one showed the Typhon Nebula. Hidden throughout the gas clouds were dozens of small blue dots, 30 hunter-killer vessels. They'd been stationed there for a week, running dark. No power signatures, no emissions. They're basically invisible. Webb nodded in approval. The hunter-killer ships were some of humanity's best weapons. They were designed for exactly this kind of situation. Small, fast, and deadly. They could hide for days with their reactors powered down to minimal levels. When the time came, they would wake up and strike. And Admiral Okonkwo's battle fleet, 2 hours away at maximum burn. They're stationed at the Proxima waypoint waiting for the signal. The plan was coming together beautifully. The Keltherans thought they were setting an ambush. They had no idea they were walking into one. Webb pulled up a recording from 3 days ago. It was audio from a Keltheran War Council meeting. The ghost drones had captured every word. The voice of Fleet Commander Zar Korath filled the room. For 6 months we have watched the humans. We have studied their routes. We have learned their patterns. They are predictable creatures. Webb listened to the whole meeting. He heard the Keltharan officers boast about their superior technology. He heard them laugh at human ship designs. He heard them celebrate a victory that hadn't happened yet. They really believe it, Nakamura said quietly. They actually think we don't know they're there. That's because we let them believe it, Webb replied. We've been very careful. Every convoy has followed the exact same route. Every supply run has used the same timing. We've given them no reason to think we suspect anything. As far as they know, we're just going about our business. But why? Why let them think they're in control? Webb turned to face his assistant. Because information is more valuable than action. If we had chased away their scouts 6 months ago, they would have known we could detect them. They would have become more careful. They would have changed their methods. Instead, we let them watch. We let them gather intelligence. We let them build their plan. And the entire time we were watching them do it. It's risky, though, Nakamura said. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Webb interrupted. We know everything. We know where every Keltharan ship will be positioned. We know their attack formations. We know their communication codes. We've even programmed overrides into their targeting systems. When the battle starts, half their weapons won't work properly. Their shields will flicker. Their sensors will give false readings. The ghost drones can do all that. They've had 6 months to burrow deep into Keltharan computer systems. At this point, we control more of their network than they do. They just don't know it yet. Webb pulled up one more display. It showed the supply convoy, moving through space toward the nebula. The ships looked ordinary. They flew in standard formation. Everything about them screamed easy target. But Webb knew what was really happening. Inside those ships, human Marines were checking their weapons. Engineers were running final diagnostics on hidden weapon systems. Pilots were reviewing attack patterns. And in the nebula itself, 30 hunter-killer ships waited in absolute silence. How long until contact? Webb asked. The convoy enters the nebula in 3 weeks. Based on Keltharan planning documents we intercepted. They'll attack when we reach the center. That gives them maximum distance from any potential reinforcements. Or at least that's what they think. Webb smiled. Admiral Okonkwo's fleet wasn't where the Keltharans expected. The Keltharans had discovered the Proxima waypoint weeks ago and dismissed it as too far away to matter. They had no idea humanity had been building a high-speed transit corridor. Okonkwo could reach the nebula in 2 hours instead of 6. 3 weeks, Webb said. 3 weeks until the Keltharans learn that being watched is worse than being fought. He turned away from the screens and headed toward the door. There was still work to do. Final preparations to make, contingency plans to review, but the hard part was done. The trap was set. Nakamura, he said at the doorway, make sure the ghost drones are ready for activation. When the shooting starts, I want every Keltharan system to experience problems. Yes, sir. They'll wish they had stayed home. Webb paused. You know what the oldest rule of warfare is? Sir, know your enemy. The Keltharan studied us for 6 months. They learned our patterns. They think they know us. But they made one mistake, and what's that? They forgot to check if we were studying them back. The Typhon Nebula was beautiful in a dangerous way. Clouds of purple gas mixed with streams of red plasma, lightning arced between pockets of charged particles, magnetic fields twisted and turned in unpredictable patterns. It was a storm frozen in space, and the human convoy was flying straight into it. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Sarah Chen watched the nebula grow larger on the main screen. Around her, the crew worked quietly. Everything appeared calm. Everything appeared normal. Sensor efficiency down to 40%, reported the tactical officer. The interference is thick. We're basically flying blind. Maintain course, Chen said. This is a regular supply run. We've done it 100 times before. But her hand rested on the armrest of her command chair and her fingers were ready. One tap would send the signal. One tap would change everything. 20,000 kilometers away, hidden in a pocket of dense gas, Fleet Commander Zar Korath watched his display. The human ships appeared as faint dots moving slowly through the nebula, right on schedule. Right on course. Exactly where they were supposed to be. All ships report ready. Veshitar said from her station. 300 vessels in position. The humans are entering the center of the kill zone. Zarkarath felt a surge of pride. His plan was perfect. The humans had no idea what was waiting for them. In moments, they would be surrounded, outgunned, destroyed. Power up weapons, he commanded. Prepare to attack. Throughout the nebula, 300 Kelthuran warships came alive. Reactors increased power. Shields activated. Weapons charged. The humans would see them now, but it was too late. The prey was in the trap. On the Indomitable, alarms began to sound. The tactical officer's voice became urgent. Captain, multiple contacts. Ships powering up all around us. Kelthuran signatures. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. The other ships in the convoy reacted exactly as they should. They broke formation. They scattered. They looked panicked. It was a perfect impression of a supply convoy that had just realized it was about to die. Chen counted silently. 3, 2, 1. All ships, Zarkarath roared. Fire! The nebula lit up with weapons fire. Energy beams lanced through the gas clouds. Missiles streaked toward the human vessels. The Kelthuran ambush had begun, and that was when Captain Chen tapped the armrest of her chair. One tap. The signal was sent. The cargo ship Reliable Venture, which had been fleeing in apparent panic, suddenly stopped. Its hull split apart in sections, revealing what was hidden underneath. Heavy armor plating, shield generators, and most importantly, weapons. Lots of weapons. This is Venture Actual, a voice said over the combat channel. Going loud. The Venture opened fire. Its first volley took a Kelthuran destroyer completely by surprise, smashing through shields that weren't properly aligned. The destroyer exploded in a ball of fire. All across the convoy, the transformation happened. 20 cargo ships shed their disguises. Missile pods deployed. Energy cannons extended. Point defense systems came online. The fat, slow cargo vessels became warships, but that wasn't the worst of it. Throughout the nebula, 30 ships that had been invisible suddenly powered up. The hunter-killer vessels had been waiting in the cold and dark for over a week. Their crews had endured silent running, using minimal life support, making no noise. Now they woke up angry. The hunter-killers were everywhere, behind Kelthuran formations, above them, below them. They had positioned themselves during the long wait, and now they were in perfect firing positions. The Kelthurans weren't surrounding the humans. The humans were surrounding them. Contact rear, a Kelthuran officer screamed. Multiple ships. Where did they come from? Zarkarath stared at his display in confusion. The tactical picture was all wrong. The humans were supposed to be running. They were supposed to be dying. Instead, they were fighting and winning. All ships reform, he commanded. Close ranks. Protect the... His command was cut off as his own ship shuddered. Alarms blared. The weapons officer looked up in shock. Commander, our targeting systems are malfunctioning. The computer is giving random solutions. The weapons won't lock on properly. Switch to manual. I'm trying. The system won't respond. On another Kelthuran ship, the shield generator began cycling through random frequencies. The shields flickered, weakened, strengthened, then failed completely. An engineer stared at his console in disbelief. This is impossible. It's like something is inside our systems, changing the code. That was exactly what was happening. The ghost drones had waited patiently for months. They had spread through the Kelthuran network like a silent disease. Now on Webb's command from Luna, they activated 3,000 tiny saboteurs, each one causing small problems. But 3,000 small problems added up to chaos. Kelthuran weapons missed their targets. Shields dropped at critical moments. Communications filled with static. Sensors gave false readings. Ship after ship found itself crippled by invisible enemies inside their own computers. Zarkarath tried to understand what was happening. His perfect plan was falling apart. But how? How could the humans have known? Get me a clear channel, he shouted. I need to coordinate the fleet. Sir, communications are down. Some kind of interference. I can't. An explosion rocked the endless judgment. A human missile had found its mark. The bridge lights flickered. Smoke filled the air. Captain Chen watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. Every ship was exactly where it should be. Every shot was calculated. The Kelthurans were trying to fight back, but they were fighting blind. Their sensors lied to them. Their weapons malfunctioned. Their shields failed at the worst possible times. Admiral Okonkwo is 2 minutes out. the communications officer reported. Chen nodded. The battle was already won, but Okonkwo's reinforcements would seal it. The Keltherans had brought 300 ships. Humanity had brought 50 disguised warships, 30 hunter-killers, and now 200 more ships were about to arrive. But numbers weren't why humanity was winning. They were winning because they had known everything. Every ship position, every attack vector, every communication code. The Keltherans had planned their ambush for months. Humanity had spent those same months planning the counter-ambush. On the Endless Judgment, Zarkarath finally understood. As another human volley smashed into his ship as he watched his fleet being torn apart, the truth became clear. They knew. He whispered. They knew everything. Veshitar looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. How? We were watching them, Zarkarath said slowly. But they were watching us. The entire time. We thought we were the hunters. But we were the prey. The main display showed Admiral Okonkwo's battle fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel. 200 fresh ships, shields up, weapons ready. The Keltherans had already taken heavy losses. Now they faced an entire battle fleet. It wasn't an ambush anymore. It was a slaughter, and the Keltherans were on the wrong side of it. Zarkarath looked at the tactical display one last time. His perfect plan. His certain victory. All of it was burning in the Typhon Nebula. Commander, Veshtar said quietly, what are your orders? Zarkarath had been a warrior his entire life. He had won battles across 17 star systems. He had never surrendered. He had never run from a fight. But he had never faced an enemy that knew every move before he made it. He had never fought against someone who had been watching him the entire time. We have two choices, he said. Fight until we are destroyed or surrender. Surrender? Veshtar could barely say the word. The Keltheran Empire does not surrender. The Keltheran Empire just learned a lesson, Zarkarath replied. Never underestimate your enemy, and never assume you're the only one watching. He reached for the communications panel. It took 3 tries before he could get a signal through the interference. When he finally connected to the human fleet, Captain Chen's face appeared on the screen. This is Fleet Commander Zarkarath, he said, and each word felt like swallowing glass. I wish to discuss terms. Chen looked at him with calm, steady eyes. Stand by for Admiral Okonkwo. The screen changed. A new face appeared. Admiral Victoria Okonkwo was younger than Zarkarath expected, but her eyes were old. They were the eyes of someone who had seen war and understood it. Commander, Okonkwo said, you have 5 minutes to power down your weapons and lower your shields. If you comply, you will be treated according to interstellar law. If you do not comply, my fleet will finish what we started. Choose now. Zarkarath looked around his damaged bridge, at his wounded crew, at his dying ship. He thought about his pride, his honor, his empire. Then he thought about the 3,000 warriors who would die if he chose pride over sense. We will comply, he said. The battle was over in 27 minutes. 27 minutes from the first shot to Zarkarath's surrender. The Keltheran fleet that had assembled to crush humanity now floated in the Typhon Nebula like broken toys. Some ships burned. Others drifted with their power cores shut down. A few had been destroyed completely. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Chen walked through the corridors. Her crew worked quickly to secure the ship and check for damage. They had taken a few hits, but nothing serious. The Keltherans had barely touched them. It was hard to hit what you couldn't see clearly, and the ghost drones had made sure Keltheran sensors saw ghosts instead of targets. Status report, Chen said to Commander Park as she returned to the bridge. 3 ships damaged, none destroyed. Casualties are light. Medical teams are handling them now. The Keltherans have powered down across the board. Admiral Okonkwo is organizing boarding parties to secure their command vessels. And our disguised cruisers? All performing within normal parameters. The retrofits held up perfectly. The Keltherans never knew what hit them. Chen sat in her command chair and allowed herself a moment of relief. The plan had worked. Better than worked, actually. It had been a complete success. But the job wasn't done yet. On the flag bridge of the UESF Resolute, Admiral Victoria Okonkwo studied the tactical display. The Keltheran fleet was scattered across several thousand cubic kilometers. Her ships were moving through them carefully, checking for any vessels that might try something stupid. Ma'am, We're receiving surrender broadcasts from 37 Keltharan captains, her communications officer said. Fleet Commander Zarkorath has ordered them to comply with our instructions. Good. I want Marine detachments on every command vessel. Priority 1 is to secure their computer cores. I want to know what other plans they might have been making. Yes, ma'am. Okonkwo had been in the Navy for 30 years. She had fought pirates, rebels, and various other threats. But this was different. This was the first time humanity had faced a major galactic power in open warfare. The Keltharan Empire was old, powerful, and until today confident. The fact that humanity had won so decisively would send a message across the galaxy. Earth was not easy prey. Not anymore. Get me Fleet Commander Zarkorath, Okonkwo said. I want to speak with him personally. While she waited, Okonkwo thought about the battle. It had been one-sided, yes, but that wasn't because humanity had better ships or more powerful weapons. The Keltharans had good technology. Their ships were well built. Their warriors were brave. They had just made one critical mistake. They had assumed humanity was stupid. They had watched human ships for months and concluded that humans were predictable, simple, easy to deceive. But while they were watching, humanity was watching them, and humanity had been doing it better. The screen flickered to life. Zarkorath's face appeared. His scales were dulled with ash and stress. One of his arms was bandaged. His ship had taken heavy damage before he surrendered. Admiral, he said stiffly. Commander, Okonkwo replied. Thank you for ordering your fleet to stand down. You saved a lot of lives today. Zarkorath's eyes narrowed. Do not mock me. I'm not mocking you. I'm serious. You could have fought to the last ship. Some commanders would have. But you chose to save your people. That takes courage. It takes defeat, Zarkorath said bitterly. A defeat I still do not fully understand. How did you know? We were so careful. Our surveillance was perfect. And yet you knew everything. How? Okonkwo considered how much to tell him. In the end, she decided honesty would serve better than mystery. The goal wasn't to humiliate the Keltharans. It was to make them think twice before trying this again. We detected your surveillance 6 months ago, she said. The moment your scouts took position near our shipping lanes, we knew. We've been watching you watch us ever since. Impossible. Our stealth systems are advanced? Yes, they are. But we've been investing heavily in sensor technology. We're not as primitive as you assumed. Zarkorath was quiet for a moment. You let us watch you. On purpose. Yes, we wanted to know what you were planning. So we let you think you were being clever. We maintained our convoy routes. We gave you no reason to suspect we knew. And while you were busy congratulating yourselves on your intelligence gathering, we were reading every report you sent, every plan you made, every ship position you chose. How? Even if you detected our scouts, you could not have accessed our communications. They are encrypted with codes we broke in the first week, Okonkwo interrupted. Commander, you need to understand something. You've been a military power for thousands of years. You've won many battles. You've conquered many worlds. But you've never faced an enemy who specializes in information warfare. That's humanity's strength. We watch, we listen, we learn. She pulled up a display and turned it so Zarkorath could see it. It showed a timeline of Keltharan activities over the past 6 months. Every meeting, every ship movement, every communication. We knew about your War Council meetings, Okonkwo continued. We knew about your tactical planning. We even knew about the argument between your officers about whether to attack from above or below. You chose above, by the way. We prepared for both. Zarkorath stared at the display. His face showed something between shock and horror. You heard everything. You were inside our systems. We were. We still are, actually. The malfunctions your ships experienced during the battle? That was us. We've had access to your computer networks for months. We could have caused problems at any time, but we waited. We wanted you to commit fully to your ambush before we countered it. How is this possible? Our security systems are supposed to be secure? They are secure against the kind of attacks you're used to. But we developed something new. Something your security systems weren't designed to catch. And we seeded your network with it bit by bit over months. By the time you attacked, we controlled more of your computer systems than you did. Okonkwo let that sink in for a moment. She could see Zarkorath processing the information, understanding how thoroughly he had been beaten, not just militarily but intellectually. Why are you telling me this? Zarkorath finally asked. If you have such capabilities, why reveal them? Because I want you to take a message back to your empire, Okonkwo said. Humanity is new to the galaxy. We're small. We don't have as many ships as you. We don't control as much territory. But we are not easy prey. We are not stupid. And we are not blind. If someone watches us, we will know. And we will be watching them back, a threat, a warning. There's a difference. We don't want war with the Keltheran Empire. We don't want to conquer your worlds or destroy your fleets. But we will defend ourselves. And as you've just learned, we're very good at it. Zarkorath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. What are your terms? Simple. You will withdraw from human space. You will return any occupied territories. You will sign a non-aggression treaty. And you will spread the word to other powers in the galaxy. Humanity is off limits. And if we refuse, then we release detailed information about this battle. Every empire in the galaxy will learn that the mighty Keltheran fleet was defeated in less than 30 minutes by a force 1/6 its size. They'll learn that your security was penetrated, your systems compromised, your tactical planning read like an open book. How do you think that will affect your reputation? It was a cold calculation, and Okonkwo felt a little bad about it. But war was war. Sometimes you had to play the cards you were dealt. Zarkorath's face hardened. You would blackmail us. I would encourage you to make the smart choice. Pride has already cost you one fleet. Don't let it cost you more. Another long silence. Then Zarkorath nodded slowly. I will recommend these terms to the Imperial Council. Good. In the meantime, your ships will remain under guard. Your crews will be treated well. Once the treaty is signed, you'll be free to go home. Admiral, Zarkorath said.
May I ask one more question?
Of course. Did you plan all of this from the beginning? 6 months ago, when you detected our scouts, did you already have this entire operation planned? Okonkwo smiled slightly. Commander, we've been planning for the possibility of conflict since the day we entered the galaxy. We knew someone would eventually try to test us. We just didn't know who or when. Your scouts gave us the who and when. The rest was just execution. You are a dangerous people, Zarkorath said. It wasn't quite respect in his voice, but it wasn't quite fear either. It was something in between. Only when we need to be, Okonkwo replied. Remember that. And tell your empire, leave humanity alone and we'll have no reason to be dangerous. Everyone wins, she ended the transmission. The screen went dark. Around her, the bridge crew continued their work, securing the victory, processing the surrendered vessels, beginning the long task of cleaning up after a battle. Okonkwo sat back in her chair. They had won, but she felt no joy in it. War was terrible even when you won. Good people had died today. Not many, but any was too many. Still, the message was sent. The galaxy now knew. Humanity could defend itself. That was worth something. 2 days after the battle, Fleet Commander Zarkorath was brought aboard the UESF Indomitable. The meeting took place in what humans called a conference room. It was simple and functional, with a long table and chairs. Nothing like the grand war chambers of the Keltheran Empire. But Zarkorath was starting to understand that humans didn't care much for grand displays. They cared about results. Admiral Okonkwo was already seated when he entered. Captain Chen sat beside her. 2 human marines stood by the door, their weapons held at rest but ready. They were an honor guard, Zarkorath had been told. But they were also a reminder that he was a prisoner, regardless of how politely he was being treated. Please sit, Okonkwo said, gesturing to a chair across from her. Zarkorath sat. His body ached from injuries sustained when his ship was hit. The human doctors had treated him well, but they could not heal wounded pride as easily as wounded flesh. I've spoken with the Imperial Council, Zarkorath said without preamble. They have agreed to your terms. All of them. They will withdraw from human space. They will return occupied territories. And they will sign your non-aggression treaty. I'm glad to hear it, Okonkwo said. I'll have our diplomatic team prepare the formal documents. Within a week, your fleet will be free to return home. They are anxious to leave. Being defeated is not a familiar feeling for my people. I understand. But I want you to understand something, Commander. This didn't have to happen. We didn't want this fight. You came to us. You chose to attack. Zarkorath's scales darkened with shame. Yes, we did. We thought you would be easy prey. Because we're new to the galaxy, Captain Chen said. It was the first time she had spoken. Because our ships look simple. Because we don't have the history or the territory of older empires. Yes, Zarkorath admitted. We have encountered many species over the centuries. Most of them were weak when they first entered the galaxy. We assumed you would be the same. Okonkwo leaned forward. Commander, I want to tell you something about humanity. We come from a world that tried to kill us at every turn. Predators, diseases, disasters. We had to adapt or die. And we adapted by becoming the best at one thing. Learning. Learning? Zarkorath repeated. We watch, we study. We take in information and we use it. When we discovered we weren't alone in the galaxy, we didn't assume we were superior. We assumed we were behind. So we learned. We studied every species we encountered. We absorbed their knowledge. We adapted their technology. We took what worked and made it better. Chen picked up the explanation. The Keltharans have been a spacefaring civilization for 3,000 years. You've perfected your way of doing things. You know what works. But that also means you've stopped questioning. You've stopped adapting. You assumed your way was the best way. And it's not, Zarkorath asked. There was no challenge in his voice. Only genuine curiosity. It's one way, Okonkwo replied. But there are others. You rely on superior firepower and tactical positioning. Those are good strategies. But we couldn't match you in firepower. We don't have 300 warships to throw into a battle. So we had to find another way. We chose information warfare. Intelligence gathering. Isometric tactics. You made your weakness into strength, Zarkorath said slowly. Exactly. That's what humans do. We've been doing it since we lived in caves. We couldn't outrun the predators on our world, so we built traps. We couldn't outfight them, so we learned to think ahead of them. We became the species that plans, that watches, that waits for the right moment. Zarkorath sat back in his chair, his forearms folded across his chest as he considered this. I begin to understand. You are not warriors in the way we are warriors. You are hunters. We're survivors, Chen corrected. And survivors do whatever it takes to survive. There was a long silence. Zarkorath looked at the two human officers. They were so different from Keltharans. Smaller, less physically imposing. Their ships were less elegant. Their weapons less refined. But they had beaten him completely. They had turned his own plan against him. They had been inside his systems, his networks, his very thoughts. How long? He asked suddenly. How long have you been watching us? Not just this operation. I mean the Keltharan Empire as a whole. Okonkwo exchanged a glance with Chen. Then she said, Since the day we detected your first scout ship in our space, that was 8 months ago. 8 months, Zarkorath repeated. And in that time, what have you learned? Everything we needed to know. Your military structure, your supply chains, your political divisions, your economic weaknesses, your technological limitations. We've studied you the way a scientist studies a specimen. Not with malice, just with thoroughness. Zarkorath felt a chill run through him. And you're telling me this because I want you to take this knowledge back to your empire, Okonkwo said. I want you to tell them what happened here. Not just the battle. The entire thing. How we watched you, how we knew everything, how we turned your own plan against you. I want every empire in this galaxy to hear that story. You want us to advertise our defeat? Our humiliation? I want you to advertise our capabilities, Okonkwo corrected. Commander, humanity is small right now. We have 23 colony worlds and maybe 200 warships total. We can't fight everyone. We can't defend against every threat. But if everyone knows what we can do, if everyone understands that attacking humanity means fighting an enemy who already knows every detail of your plan, then maybe they'll think twice before trying. You want to use our defeat as a warning to others, yes. And in return, we're offering you something valuable: peace, trade, knowledge exchange. We don't want to be your enemies. We want to be your neighbors. But we need you to understand that we're not prey. We're not weak. We're just different. Zarkorath was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, What did you mean when you said you were inside our systems? These ghost drones Admiral Okonkwo mentioned. What are they? Captain Chen pulled out a small case. She opened it and showed Zarkorath what was inside. It looked like a grain of sand, maybe smaller. This is a ghost drone, Chen said. It's a microscopic computer with sensors, communication relay, and basic AI. We deployed thousands of them. They attached themselves to your communication signals and spread through your network. Your security systems never detected them because they're not designed to look for something this small. And these things let you control our ships? Not control, disrupt. We couldn't take over your vessels, but we could cause malfunctions. Make your weapons miss. Make your shields flicker. Make your sensors lie to you. It was enough to give us an advantage. Sarkarath stared at the tiny device. It was smaller than his smallest claw. And humanity had used thousands of them to infiltrate his entire fleet. The implications were terrifying. You could have destroyed us, he said quietly. If you can disrupt our systems that completely, you could have just shut down our life support. You could have killed us all without firing a shot. Yes, Okonkwo admitted. We could have. But that's not who we are. We don't kill when we don't have to. We defended ourselves. We stopped your attack. But we didn't slaughter you. That's the other thing I want you to tell your empire. Humanity is dangerous when threatened. But we're also merciful when given the choice. Sarkarath looked at the two humans. He had come into this meeting expecting more humiliation, more defeat. Instead, he was beginning to feel something else. Not quite respect, but perhaps understanding. Your species is strange, he said finally. You are warriors, but you do not glory in war. You are powerful, but you do not seek to dominate. You defeated us, but you offer us friendship. I do not understand you. You don't have to understand us, Chen said with a slight smile. You just have to not attack us. Everything else can come later. Okonkwo stood. Your ships will be released tomorrow. You're free to go home. The non-aggression treaty will be transmitted to your Imperial Council within the day. I suggest they sign it quickly. And Commander? Yes? When you tell them about this, make sure they understand the real lesson. It's not that humanity has superior technology. It's not that we're better warriors. It's that we're always watching. We're always learning. We're always adapting. That's what makes us dangerous. And that's why it's better to be our friend than our enemy. Sarkarath stood as well. For a moment, he considered offering some kind of salute or gesture of respect, but he didn't know what would be appropriate, so he simply nodded. I will deliver your message, Admiral, and I will recommend that the Imperial Council take it seriously. That's all I ask. Weeks later, Commander Marcus Webb sat in his facility beneath Luna's surface. The screens around him showed data from across the galaxy. The ghost drones were still active, still spreading, still watching. Humanity's eyes and ears were everywhere now. On one screen, he could see diplomatic chatter. The Keltheran Empire had signed the treaty. They had withdrawn from human space. And more importantly, they were spreading the word. Other empires were hearing about the Battle of Typhon Nebula. They were hearing about humanity's capabilities. Some were scared. Some were intrigued. But all of them were paying attention. Webb pulled up a visual of Earth from space. It looked peaceful from this distance. Blue and white and beautiful. No one would guess it was the home of a species that had just defeated a major galactic power. But that was fine. Let them underestimate Earth. Let them think humanity was lucky or weak or primitive. Every time someone underestimated humanity, it gave humanity time to watch them, to learn about them. To prepare, sir, Lieutenant Nakamura said from her station. We're detecting increased surveillance from the Dravari Collective. They've positioned 3 scout ships near the Outer Rim colonies. Webb smiled. The Dravari were another old empire. Powerful, proud, probably thinking they could succeed where the Keltherans had failed. Deploy ghost drones to their sector, Webb said calmly. Let's see what they're planning. And let them think they're being very clever while we watch them. Yes, sir. Webb leaned back in his chair. The galaxy was full of threats. Empires that had been conquering worlds when humanity was still discovering fire. Civilizations with technology and power that humans couldn't match. But humanity had something they didn't. Humanity had learned, through thousands of years of struggle on a hostile world, that the smart survive. The watchful survive. The prepared survive. Keep monitoring, Webb said. All channels. All sectors. I want to know about every ship that looks at us sideways. And I want our ghost drones in their systems before they even think about attacking. Understood. Webb looked at the screens one more time. Earth hung there in the darkness, small and vulnerable. But appearances, as the Keltherans had learned, could be deceiving. The galaxy thought humanity was weak. Let them think that. By the time they realized humans were watching, it would already be too late. And that, Webb thought, was exactly how humanity liked it. The emergency alarm blared through the small farming community of Haven's Rest. It was a sound no one had heard in over 15 years. Red lights flashed in every home, every shop, and every public space on the quiet agricultural world. Jack Hayes was in his garden when he heard it. He stood up slowly, his knees cracking with the movement. Soil fell from his weathered hands as he looked to the sky. He had known this day might come. A small part of him had been waiting for it. Inside his modest home, a message flashed on his old communications unit. The screen had been dark for so long he had almost forgotten it existed. The message was brief. Krenthak attacking New Montana colony. All veterans requested. Critical situation. Transport arriving in 1 hour. Jack stared at the screen for several long seconds. Then, without hesitation, he walked to his bedroom closet. Behind his everyday clothes and farming gear was a hidden panel. He placed his palm against it, and after a moment, it slid open. Inside was a simple metal case, sealed and untouched for years. 5 miles away, Mary Winters lowered her mug of tea when she heard the alarm. She had been teaching her granddaughter how to play chess. The little girl looked confused, but Mary just smiled gently. "I need to go away for a little while," she said. She kissed the girl's forehead and walked calmly to her study. Like Jack, she had a hidden compartment, this one beneath a loose floorboard under her desk. The case she pulled out was longer and thinner than Jack's. Across the river, in the community school, George Franklin was explaining crop rotation to a group of students when the alarm sounded. The children jumped in surprise, but George remained perfectly still, as if he had been expecting the sound. He dismissed the class with unusual authority, his normally gentle voice suddenly firm and clear. "School is canceled for today. Go straight. I home." The children, sensing the change in their teacher, obeyed without question. In the colony's engineering workshop, Linda Powell set down her welding tool with deliberate care. She had been helping build a new irrigation system. When the alarm sounded, the other engineers looked confused and worried. Linda did not. She simply removed her work gloves, nodded to her colleagues, and walked out without a word. All 4 veterans converged on the colony's small spaceport an hour later. They carried their sealed cases and small bags with personal items. They had not changed into uniforms. They wore simple civilian clothes. Yet anyone who saw them walking toward the landing pad felt a strange chill. Something about the way they moved was different from the other colonists. They did not hurry, but their steps were somehow more direct, more certain. They did not speak much as they waited for the transport. They had known each other for decades. Words had long ago become mostly unnecessary between them. "New Montana," George finally said, breaking the silence. "Mining colony, rich in rare minerals, strategic location." Mary nodded. 3,000 miles of rough terrain. Multiple settlement clusters. Linda tapped her fingers against her case. Poor defensive infrastructure. They never expected to be a target. Jack said nothing. He just watched the sky. The transport that arrived was small and unmarked. It landed silently, its engines barely disturbing the air. The pilot who emerged was young, wearing the uniform of the Colonial Defense Force. His eyes widened slightly when he saw the 4 older civilians waiting for him. "You're the veterans?" he asked, his voice betraying his doubt. Jack finally spoke. "Yes, we're ready to leave." The pilot hesitated. "I was told I would be picking up elite combat specialists." Mary smiled faintly. "You were told correctly. Let's not waste time." As they boarded the transport, the pilot couldn't help but stare. Jack's hair was gray, his face lined with age. Mary walked with a slight limp. George had the soft hands of a teacher. Linda looked like someone's kind grandmother. Once they were seated, the pilot engaged the launch sequence and opened a briefing file on the main screen. "New Montana has been under siege for 3 days, he explained, showing them images of the Krenthak fleet in orbit around the colony. "Our regular forces have been pushed back to the central settlement. The mining outposts have already fallen." The veterans studied the images in silence. The Krenthak ships were massive, their design alien and threatening. The aliens have better weapons, better shields, and better tactical systems than anything we've developed. The pilot continued. They've conquered 6 colonies in the past year alone. No one has been able to stop them. Jack exchanged glances with the others. We've faced worse odds, he said quietly. The pilot looked skeptical, but didn't argue. As the transport left the atmosphere, he activated the faster-than-light drive. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines as they accelerated. It will take us 18 hours to reach New Montana, the pilot said. You should rest while you can. The veterans nodded but made no move toward the sleeping quarters. Instead, they opened their cases for the first time in years. From his case, Jack removed what looked like ordinary gloves. Only someone with specialized knowledge would notice the nearly invisible circuitry woven into the fabric. Mary's case contained an old rifle that seemed almost primitive compared to modern weapons. She began checking its components with practiced efficiency. George pulled out a small device that resembled a simple calculator. When he activated it, however, complex holographic displays appeared above it, showing battlefield simulations. Linda's case held tools that looked more suited for construction than combat. Her fingers moved over them with familiar affection. The pilot watched in confusion. That's your equipment? Those things look ancient. They're exactly what we need, Linda replied without looking up. As the ship hurtled through space, Jack gazed out the viewport. He thought about the peaceful life he had built, the garden he had tended that morning, the neighbors who knew him only as a quiet farmer. He thought about how that life would seem like a dream in the coming days. He thought about New Montana and the people there, facing an enemy they couldn't hope to defeat. He remembered what it was like to fight against impossible odds, to do things that shouldn't be possible. He flexed his fingers inside the special gloves. They still fit perfectly. We should discuss strategy, George said, activating his tactical display. The holographic images showed the layout of New Montana's main settlement. The 4 veterans gathered around the display. To an observer, they might have looked like ordinary older people examining a map. Nothing about them suggested they were anything special. But in 18 hours, the Krenthak would learn differently. In 18 hours, everything would change. The transport ship emerged from faster-than-light travel with a gentle shudder. Through the viewport, New Montana came into view. It was a rocky world with patches of engineered forests surrounding the human settlements. In orbit above the planet, the massive Krenthak ships loomed like dark predators. We'll have to use the emergency approach, the pilot said, his voice tense. The main spaceport is under alien control. Jack nodded. Take us in through the southern mountain range. Low and quiet. The pilot looked surprised. How did you know about that route? It's not on any official charts. We know many things, Mary said simply. The transport dipped into the planet's atmosphere. The pilot guided it skillfully between jagged mountain peaks, keeping close to the terrain to avoid Krenthak scanners. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, they approached a small landing pad hidden in a narrow valley. Secondary port for emergency supplies, George explained. Every mining colony has one. When they landed, a woman in a colonial defense force uniform was waiting for them. Commander Susan Miller looked exhausted. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her uniform was stained with dirt and what might have been blood. You're the Special Forces team they sent? She asked, her voice flat with disappointment as the 4 older civilians walked down the ramp. Jack extended his hand. Jack Hayes. This is Mary Winters, George Franklin, and Linda Powell. We're the response team. Miller shook his hand weakly. I requested elite combat specialists. We're fighting for our lives here. We understand the situation, Jack replied calmly. Take us to your command center. Miller hesitated, then seemed to give up arguing. Follow me. We don't have much time. The Krenthak are preparing for another push. They drove through a series of underground tunnels in a small electric vehicle. The tunnels had been mining shafts once, now converted to emergency transport routes. Occasionally, they passed groups of frightened civilians huddled together in side chambers. We've evacuated as many people as we could from the outer settlements, Miller explained. 3,000 civilians in spaces meant for a few hundred. Food and water won't last long. None of the veterans commented. They watched everything with alert eyes, taking in details that others might miss. The command center was a large cave that had been equipped with military computer systems and communications gear. Maps and tactical displays covered the walls. About 20 Colonial Defense Force officers worked at various stations, their faces grim. Miller called for attention. "These people have been sent to assist us," she announced, gesturing to the 4 veterans. The officers looked up, and Jack could see the same disappointment in their eyes that he had seen in Miller's. "What's our status?" George asked, moving directly to the main tactical display. A young officer stepped forward. "The Krenthak hold the spaceport and the northern mining complex. They've established 3 forward bases here, here, and here." He pointed to locations on the map. "We've got defensive positions around the central settlement, but our weapons barely dent their armor. They have some kind of energy shield technology." Linda moved closer to examine the display. "What's your power infrastructure like?" The officer looked confused. "We have the main generator in the central settlement and backup systems in these locations." "Why?" "I'll need access to your engineering systems," Linda said, "and a team of people who know the colony's electrical grid." Miller frowned. "We're fighting for survival and you want to look at our power grid?" "Yes," Linda replied simply. Mary had moved to a different display that showed the terrain around the colony. "I need the highest elevation point with a clear view of the northern approach," she said. Another officer pointed to a spot on the map. "There's an old observation post here, but it's of no tactical value. The Krenthak warriors have personal shields. Sniper positions are useless." Mary nodded. "I'll need transportation there." Jack turned to Miller. "When is the next Krenthak attack expected?" "Our intel suggests they'll move at dawn," Miller replied. "About 6 hours from now. They're bringing in their heavy assault platforms." "Good," Jack said. "That gives us time." Miller's frustration was visible. "Time for what? You haven't even told us your plan or what kind of specialist you are." George looked up from the tactical display. "We're what you asked for, Commander. Veterans." "Veterans of what?" Miller demanded. "You look like you should be in retirement homes, not on a battlefield." For the first time, a faint smile crossed Jack's face. "We fought in wars your history books don't mention, Commander. Now we need to prepare." The 4 veterans split up, each focused on their tasks. Linda gathered a team of engineers and disappeared into the colony's maintenance tunnels. Mary collected a small pack of supplies and left with a guide for the observation post. George remained in the command center, studying the defensive positions and making small adjustments to the placement of troops. Jack walked alone through the tunnels, observing the frightened civilians and the young, nervous soldiers. He stopped occasionally to speak quietly with squad leaders, giving them simple instructions that seemed odd but specific. Commander Miller followed him, her frustration growing. "My people are dying," she said finally. "I need to know what you're planning." Jack stopped and turned to her. "Your regular tactics won't work against the Krenthak. They've seen them before. They expect them. And you have something better?" Miller asked skeptically. "We have something different," Jack replied. "Sometimes that's enough." In the engineering section, Linda was making modifications to the colony's power distribution system. The local engineers watched in confusion as she rerouted critical systems in ways that violated standard safety protocols. "This will create power surges in sections 3 through 7, one engineer protested. "Yes, it will," Linda agreed, continuing her work. At the observation post, Mary unpacked her old rifle. The Colonial Defense Force soldier who had guided her watched curiously. "That weapon is ancient," he commented. "Our latest rifles can't penetrate." "Krenthak armor. What makes you think that one can?" Mary didn't answer. She simply began making careful adjustments to her scope, her weathered hands steady and precise. In the command center, George had created a new defensive strategy that left several approaches to the colony seemingly undefended. "This is suicide," one of the officers argued. "You're creating gaps in our line." "They're not gaps," George replied calmly. "They're invitations." As dawn approached, Jack returned to the command center. He found Miller staring at the tactical display, her expression torn between hope and despair. "Your people are in position," she said, "but I still don't understand how 4 aging veterans are going to change anything against an enemy that has overwhelmed every defense we've thrown at them." Jack stood beside her, looking at the display showing the Krenthak forces massing for their attack. "Commander," he said quietly, "have you ever seen a storm front hit a mountain range? How everything seems calm until the moment of impact, and then everything changes in seconds." Miller looked at him, confusion in her eyes. "Watch," Jack said, his voice steady as the first alarms began to sound. "You're about to see exactly that." The first light of dawn broke over the mountains of New Montana. In the alien ships above, the Krenthak prepared for what they expected would be a simple victory. They had faced human defenses before. Their algorithms had calculated every possible human response. They knew exactly what to expect. Inside the main Krenthak vessel, war leader Krastul studied the tactical display. His forces had easily taken the outer settlements. Now they would crush the main colony and secure the valuable mining resources. The humans always fought the same way, with the same tactics. Predictable. Weak. "Begin the attack," Krastul ordered. Standard formation. In the colony's command center, alarms sounded as sensors detected movement from the Krenthak positions. Commander Miller and her officers watched the tactical screens with grim expressions. "They're coming in force," one officer reported. "At least 2,000 warriors with support platforms." Miller glanced at George, who stood calmly by the main display. "Your defensive positions are in place," she said, doubt clear in her voice. "I hope you know what you're doing." George nodded. "Watch the eastern ridge," he said simply. The Krenthak warriors moved in perfect formation across the rocky terrain. Their armor gleamed in the morning light, energy shields creating a faint blue glow around each soldier. Behind them floated the heavy weapons platforms, massive discs that carried enough firepower to level the colony's defenses. Jack stood at a small outpost, watching the approaching aliens through old-fashioned binoculars. Next to him, a squad of 6 young Colonial Defense Force soldiers waited nervously. "Remember what I told you," Jack said. "Wait for my signal. Not before. Not after." The soldiers nodded, though they didn't understand why this old man's timing mattered so much. In the maintenance tunnels beneath the colony, Linda had finished her modifications to the power grid. She had positioned small teams of engineers at key junction points with simple instructions. "When I give the word, flip these switches in exact sequence," she told them. "The timing must be perfect." On the observation post high above the battlefield, Mary lay perfectly still behind her rifle. Through her scope, she watched the approaching alien forces. She counted silently, her breathing slow and controlled. The Krenthak reached the first defensive line. They met exactly what they expected, a standard Colonial Defense Force barrier with predictable weapon emplacements. Their forward units engaged, confident in their superior shields and firepower. But then something unexpected happened. Mary fired her first shot from the observation post. The ancient rifle made a sound unlike the modern weapons. The bullet, and actual physical projectile, not an energy weapon, traveled along a path that should have been impossible according to standard ballistics. It struck a Krenthak officer at the exact point where the energy shield generator connected to the armor. The alien fell instantly. The Krenthak command structure registered confusion. Their sensors hadn't detected a threat from that position. Before they could recalibrate, Mary fired 5 more shots in rapid succession. 5 more command officers fell. In the command center, Miller stared at the display in disbelief. "How is she doing that? Their shields should stop any projectile." George didn't answer. He was focused on the eastern section of the battlefield. "Now," he said into his communicator. On the eastern ridge, Jack gave a hand signal to his small squad. They fired their weapons not at the Krenthak warriors, but at specific points on the rocky ground in front of them. The shots kicked up dust in a pattern that seemed random. But as the dust cloud formed, something strange happened to the Krenthak. Energy shields in that sector. The shields flickered and weakened. Linda's voice came through on the command channel. Ready, she said. In the tunnels, Linda nodded to her engineers. They flipped the switches in sequence. Power surged through the colony's grid in a pattern that created a specific electromagnetic pulse. It was a pulse that, by all modern understanding, should have been harmless. But the Krenthak weapons platforms passing over that section of the battlefield suddenly lost altitude. Their control systems failed and they crashed to the ground. In the Krenthak command ship, alarms sounded. War Leader Krastul stared at his displays in disbelief. "What is happening?" he demanded. "These are not standard human tactics." His subordinates had no answers. Their battle computers were trying to analyze the unexpected developments, but the humans were using methods that weren't in their database. On the battlefield, the Krenthak formation began to break apart. They had been driving forward in a precise pattern, but now gaps appeared in their lines. And into those gaps, the Colonial Defense Force troops moved exactly as George had positioned them. Miller watched the tactical display with growing amazement. "They're falling back," she whispered. "I've never seen the Krenthak retreat." George nodded. "They're confused. Their algorithms can't process what's happening." A Colonial Defense Force officer rushed into the command center. "Sir, the aliens are sending in their elite guard. They're heading straight for the command bunker." Miller paled. "The elite guard has never been defeated in ground combat." George touched his communicator. "Jack, they're sending the elite guard to the command bunker." "Understood," Jack's calm voice replied. The Krenthak elite guard moved with frightening speed toward the colony's central area. These warriors were larger than the others, their armor more advanced. They carried weapons that could cut through standard defenses like paper. Jack stood alone in the open area in front of the command bunker. He had removed his jacket and now wore only a simple shirt and pants. The special gloves still covered his hands. The Colonial Defense Force soldiers nearby looked at him in alarm. "Sir, you need to take cover," one shouted. "Those are elites coming." Jack didn't move. He stood relaxed, almost casual, as the 12 massive alien warriors approached. The lead Krenthak elite raised its weapon, targeting Jack. Then it paused, its sensory apparatus scanning the lone human. According to its threat assessment, this aging human posed no danger. Yet something about the man's stance triggered an alert in its combat systems. The alien fired. The energy bolt should have vaporized Jack instantly, but Jack wasn't there anymore. He had moved with impossible speed, stepping aside at the last moment, and then he was moving toward the aliens. In the command center, everyone stared at the video feed in shock. Jack Hayes, a man who appeared to be in his 60s, moved like nothing they had ever seen. He flowed between the massive aliens like water, his hands striking with precision at points on their armor that shouldn't have been vulnerable. 2 elite warriors fell in the first 5 seconds. 3 more in the next 10. The remaining aliens tried to form a defensive circle, but Jack was always where they didn't expect him to be. Miller turned to George, her eyes wide. "What is he?" George watched the screen calmly. "What we all are. The result of a program they don't teach you about in military history." Throughout the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Mary's impossible shots continued to eliminate key Krenthak. "Commanders, Linda's power surges disabled alien technology that should have been immune to such simple tactics. The defensive positions George had established caught the Krenthak in crossfires they couldn't have predicted. And Jack, facing the cream of the alien military, moved like a ghost among them, his gloved hands finding weaknesses that no analysis had ever detected. In the Krenthak command ship, War Leader Krastul ordered a full retreat for the first time in his long career. "These are not normal humans," he stated. "They do not fight according to any known pattern. We must withdraw and analyze this new threat." The Krenthak forces began to pull back, leaving behind more dead and disabled warriors than they had lost in all previous human encounters combined. In the colony's command center, stunned silence gave way to cautious celebration. But Commander Miller wasn't celebrating. She was watching George Franklin with new eyes. "Who are you people?" she asked, quietly. "Really?" George looked at her steadily. "Just veterans, Commander. From a war everyone tried to forget." The Krenthak retreat created a strange quiet over the battlefield. The Colonial Defense Force soldiers stared in disbelief at the alien warriors moving back toward their ships. No one had ever seen the Krenthak abandon a planned assault. Jack walked back to the command bunker, his movements now slow and deliberate. The soldiers who had witnessed his fight with the elite guard stepped aside as he passed, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. He looked tired now, his face lined with exhaustion, but otherwise showed no signs of having just defeated 12 of the most dangerous warriors in known space. In the command center, Miller was questioning George with growing intensity. "I need answers," she insisted. "Those combat techniques aren't possible. The way Hayes moved, the shots Winters made, Powell's power disruptions, none of that should work against Krenthak technology." George sighed. The Krenthak base their tactics on analyzing patterns. They expect humans to fight according to established military doctrine. We don't. That's not an explanation, Miller pressed. The door opened, and Jack entered. He flexed, his fingers inside the special gloves wincing slightly. "They're regrouping," he said without preamble. "We have maybe 2 hours before they try again." Linda's voice came through on the comm. "Jack, I need to see you, Maintenance Section 3. Jack nodded to George and left without another word to Miller. As he walked through the tunnels, Colonial, citizens and soldiers alike stepped back to let him pass. Word had spread quickly about what had happened on the battlefield. In Maintenance Section 3, Linda was examining a captured Krenthak weapon. She looked up as Jack entered. "Their technology has evolved," she said. "The power signatures are more complex than the last time we faced them." Jack raised an eyebrow. "The last time?" "Proxima Centauri, 2138. The incident that was officially recorded as a mining accident." Linda adjusted her glasses. "These are the same species, but their tech has advanced." Jack nodded. "Can you continue to disrupt their systems?" "For now, but they'll adapt. They always do." Linda pointed to a display showing energy readings. "The next wave will have modified shields. Mary's shots won't penetrate so easily. Then we'll need to modify our approach too," Jack said. Mary joined them a few minutes later, her ancient rifle slung over her shoulder. Her face showed none of the strain that was evident on Jack's. 17 command officers eliminated, she reported. But they're changing their command structure, becoming more decentralized. George arrived last, carrying a data pad showing the battlefield map. "They're consolidating their forces here," he said, pointing to a location north of the colony. "Pulling in all their remaining troops for one massive push." The 4 veterans looked at each other. They had worked together for so long that much of their communication happened without words. "Option 3? Linda suggested. Jack considered, then shook his head. "Too many civilians nearby." "Option 5. Mary frowned. "Option 5 requires all 4 of us in exposed positions. It's our best chance to end this quickly," Jack replied. George nodded slowly. "I'll update the tactical positions." As the veterans discussed their plans, Commander Miller approached with 2 senior officers. She had clearly been listening. "Whatever you're planning, I need to know," she demanded. "These are my people you're risking." The veterans turned to face her. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Jack nodded. "You deserve to know. But what we tell you cannot go beyond this room." Miller hesitated, then dismissed her officers. When they were alone, she crossed her arms. "I'm listening." "Before the Colonial Defense Force, before the unification," George began, "Earth's nations fought wars using specialized soldiers." "Super soldiers?" Miller asked, her tone skeptical. "That's a myth." "Not super," Linda corrected. "Enhanced, specific modifications. Not to make us stronger or faster, but to make us unpredictable. The Krenthak aren't the first alien species humanity has encountered," Jack explained. "Just the first one officially acknowledged. 50 years ago, there were incidents. First contact situations that went badly. The problem was tactical. Predictability," Mary continued. "Alien species with advanced technology could analyze human combat patterns and develop perfect countermeasures. Conventional forces always lost. So a program was created, George said. Project Anomaly. They selected soldiers with specific cognitive traits and enhanced those traits through a combination of neural modification and specialized training. Jack held up his gloved hands. These aren't weapons. They're interfaces. They link to implants that alter our perception of time and space in combat situations. Mary doesn't aim where a target is, Linda explained. She aims where probability suggests a vulnerability might appear. I don't disable technology by understanding how it works. I create disruptions that have no logical pattern for it to defend against. And Hayes? Miller asked, looking at Jack. Jack's enhancements focus on movement prediction, George said. He doesn't fight the enemy. He fights where the enemy won't expect him to be. Miller shook her head in disbelief. If this technology exists, why isn't it standard for all our forces? Because it kills us, Jack said simply. Neural degradation. The four of us are the only survivors from our group. Most didn't last 5 years after the enhancements. How long ago was that? Miller asked quietly. 30 years, Mary answered. We should have been dead 2 decades ago. We learned to manage the degradation by living quiet lives, using our abilities sparingly. Until today, Linda added. George turned back to the tactical display. The price for what we're about to do will be high. For us, personally. But it's necessary. Miller looked at each of them in turn. What exactly are you planning? The Krenthak adapt quickly, Jack explained. They're already adjusting to our individual abilities, but they've never faced all 4 of us using our enhancements, in perfect synchronization. Option 5 is a coordinated attack, George continued. All 4 of us from different positions creating a cascading series of unpredictable events that their tactical systems can't possibly analyze in real time. It will break their command structure completely, Mary said. Force a full retreat. But the neural load? Linda looked at Jack with concern. Will be significant, he finished for her. We all know the risks. Miller was silent for a long moment. These enhancements, this program, it was hidden from history? The ethical implications were problematic, George said. When the Colonial Defense Force was formed, cleaner methods of space warfare were preferred. Our program was discontinued. Officially, it never existed. Jack checked the time. We have 40 minutes before they attack again. Commander, we'll need your forces positioned exactly as we specify. Miller straightened. Tell me what you need. As the veterans outlined their plan, activity in the colony increased. Troops moved to new positions. Engineers prepared equipment. Everyone worked with new purpose, though few understood the details of what was happening. In the Krenthak command ship, war leader Kraztul studied the human colony with growing frustration. His analysts had no explanation for their earlier defeat. These humans use combat methods outside all known parameters, one subordinate reported. They appear to violate basic tactical principles. They are still humans, Kraztul insisted. They can be defeated. Prepare all remaining forces for a single, concentrated assault. Back in the colony, the 4 veterans made their final preparations. They stood together briefly before moving to their positions. Like old times, Mary said quietly. Let's hope we all walk away from this one, Linda replied. George squeezed Jack's shoulder. See you on the other side, brother. Jack nodded. Just remember, don't push beyond the red no matter what happens. They separated, each heading to their designated position for option 5. As Jack walked alone to his post, he felt the familiar pressure building behind his eyes. The neural implants were already warming up, preparing for what was to come. He knew the cost of what they were about to do, but he also knew the alternative. In the distance, the Krenthak forces began to move. Dawn broke over New Montana for the second time since the veterans had arrived. The air was still, tense with anticipation. In the distance, the Krenthak forces had formed a massive wedge formation. All their remaining troops and equipment were positioned for one overwhelming assault. In the command center, Commander Miller watched the tactical display. The colony's defenders were in position according to the veterans' instructions, though many of the placements made little sense to her conventional military training. "They're moving," an officer reported. Miller touched her communicator. "All units, hold position until ordered. Do not engage without direct command." She took a deep breath. "Veteran team, they're coming." Jack stood alone on a rocky outcropping, with a clear view of the approaching alien force. He wore only light clothing, his special gloves, and a small communication device in his ear. His eyes were closed as he focused his mind, preparing for what was to come. "Acknowledged," he replied, quietly. Option 5 commencing. Half a mile away, Mary lay in position with her rifle. Unlike before, she wasn't aiming at the Krenthak. Instead, her rifle was pointed at a series of small metal reflectors that George had positioned across the battlefield. "In position," she confirmed. Linda was in the colony's main power station, her hands poised over a complex array of switches and controls that she had modified overnight. "Ready," she said. George stood in the command center beside Miller. He held his small tactical device, now connected to the colony's main systems. "All calculations complete," he reported. "Ready on my mark." The Krenthak advanced with confidence. Their defeat the previous day had been analyzed, adjustments made. Their shields now rotated frequencies randomly to prevent the type of shots that Mary had made. Their command structure had been decentralized to prevent easy targeting. Their heavy weapons platforms were shielded against electromagnetic interference. War leader Krastul watched from his command ship, certain of victory. These humans had surprised them once, but the Krenthak always adapted. 3 minutes to optimal firing range, his tactical officer reported. On the battlefield, George looked at the display one final time. "Mark," he said. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when the Colonial Defense Force officers reviewed the recordings, they had to slow the footage to understand the sequence of events. Linda activated her modified power system. A pulse of energy shot through the colony's grid, but unlike before, it didn't target the Krenthak shields directly. Instead, it created a specific pattern of electromagnetic disturbance in the air above the battlefield. At exactly that moment, Mary fired her rifle. The bullet hit the first reflector, which sent it ricocheting to the second, then the third, creating a precise pattern of impacts. Each impact created a small sonic disturbance. These sonic disturbances interacted with the electromagnetic pattern Linda had created, producing a complex interference wave that rippled across the battlefield in a mathematical pattern that no standard tactical system could have predicted. As this wave passed over the Krenthak front line, Jack opened his eyes. His neural implants activated fully, and time seemed to slow around him. He saw not where the aliens were, but where the interference pattern created momentary vulnerabilities in their formation. Jack moved. To the Colonial Defense Force soldiers watching, he seemed to disappear and reappear at different points across the battlefield. He struck with precise movements, each motion calculated by George's tactical modeling to create maximum disruption. In the command center, George monitored the pattern as it unfolded. "Phase 2, he ordered. "All units fire according to pre-programmed sequence." The colony's defenders opened fire, not aiming directly at the Krenthak, but at specific points around them. The combined effect created another layer of the pattern. The Krenthak formation began to break apart. Their carefully planned advance dissolved into confusion. Individual warriors fired randomly, unable to track the threats that seemed to come from impossible angles. War leader Krastul stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The neat formations of his forces had transformed into a chaotic mess in less than 30 seconds. "What is happening?" he demanded. His tactical officer shook his head. "Unknown, war leader. Our systems cannot analyze the pattern. It appears random, but achieves precise effects." On the battlefield, the 4 veterans' combined abilities created a cascading effect that grew more powerful with each second. Mary's impossible shots, Linda's energy manipulations, George's tactical calculations, and Jack's reality-defying movements formed a symphony of unpredictable actions that the Krenthak's logical, pattern-seeking minds could not comprehend. Jack moved through the alien forces like a ghost, appearing exactly where their defenses were weakest at exactly the right moment. Each movement was perfectly timed to coincide with Mary's shots and Linda's energy pulses. But the strain was becoming visible. Blood trickled from Jack's nose as his neural implants overheated. Mary's hands trembled as she made increasingly impossible calculations for her shots. Linda's face was pale as she pushed her enhancements to maintain the complex energy pattern. In the command center, George gripped the edge of the console, his eyes unfocused as his mind processed tactical data beyond human capacity. After 3 minutes of coordinated assault, the Krenthak began a full retreat. Not just from the battlefield, but from the planet itself. Their ships launched from the surface, abandoning equipment and even some of their wounded. In the command ship, war leader Krasatul made a decision that would change the course of the war. All forces, full retreat from this system, he ordered. These humans do not fight according to any recognizable pattern. They are anomalies. Until we understand, we cannot defeat them. On the battlefield, Jack fell to his knees, exhausted. Mary's rifle slipped from her fingers. Linda staggered against the control panel. George collapsed into a chair, blood seeping from his ears. Commander Miller rushed to the nearest medical team. "Get to the veterans immediately, all of them." Hours later, the 4 veterans lay in the colony's medical center, connected to life support equipment. The colony's doctor looked grim as she reported to Miller. Severe neural degradation in all 4. Their brains show patterns I've never seen before. It's as if they've burned out critical pathways. "Will they survive?" Miller asked. "I don't know. Whatever they did out there nearly killed them." Miller looked at the 4 still figures. These strange, impossible veterans had saved her colony, when nothing else could have. Outside, celebrations had begun as news of the Krenthak retreat spread. Not just from New Montana, but reports were coming in of alien forces withdrawing from other human colonies as well. Something about what had happened here had frightened them on a fundamental level. 3 days later, Jack opened his eyes. The other veterans were awake too, weakened but alive. Miller sat beside Jack's bed. "You did it," she said. "The Krenthak have pulled back from all human territories. They're requesting peace talks." Jack smiled faintly. "Good. The Colonial Defense Force wants to debrief you. They're sending a ship." Mary, from her bed across the room, laughed weakly. "They want to know if there are more like us." "Are there?" Miller asked. George shook his head. "We were the last. Project Anomaly ended decades ago." Linda raised a trembling hand. "But we can still teach. Not the enhancements. Those were unethical. But the principles. Unpredictability. Fighting outside expected patterns." Jack closed his eyes. "The Krenthak aren't evil. They just don't understand humans. They expect logic, patterns. Show them that humans don't always follow patterns, and they'll respect it." Miller nodded slowly. "I'll make sure your recommendations reach the right people." A week later, a small unmarked ship departed from New Montana. Despite offers of medals, positions in the Colonial Defense Force, and substantial rewards, the 4 veterans had asked only for a quiet return to their home. As they prepared to leave, Commander Miller asked Jack one final question. "Why did you come? You knew what it might cost you." Jack looked at the other 3 veterans, his oldest friends, the only people who understood what they had been through together. "Because that's what veterans do," he answered simply. "When called, we serve." The ship disappeared into the stars, carrying the 4 old warriors back to their quiet lives. But across human space, the story spread. How 4 veteran human warriors entered a battle against an undefeated alien force, and everything changed in seconds.